Greetings, YouTube. I work in a factory. I run a press. I've worked in manufacturing in one capacity or another for 38 years. I've seen a lot of stuff. I've seen a lot of bosses, a lot of business suits, talked to a lot of engineers, seen a lot of successes, seen a bunch of failures. And I've noticed a few things over that time. That there is a vast difference between the managerial narrative of the corporate culture, which is no surprise to anybody. They are not living in reality, and we know that. But even more glaring for me is that the engineers seem to think production works in a way that it doesn't. They seem to have this ideal of this pristine concept of production that will follow hard and fast rules, where a machine is a machine is a machine. And it doesn't matter which machine you put a mold into, they will all operate exactly the same. Whereas I know for a fact that there can be two presses sitting right next to each other, the exact same model, made the exact same year. And if you take a mold out of one of them and put it into the next one that is so close I can touch both presses, it won't work in the second press. And nobody in the universe is ever going to be able to explain why. They've tried. It just doesn't. That's frustrating for the people that have to work on the floor because the engineers think they do work the same. They design processes that are never taken into account the humans that have to operate them. They come up with these ideas where they want to try out a new concept so that they put their thumbprint on this. So it'll be different than the designs of the past. Occasionally, management will step in and tell people to do stuff too that isn't too smart. As opposed to coming down to the floor and asking, okay, tell me what reality is. I'm going to shelve orthodoxy for a minute. I want you to tell me what reality is. And if they were to listen and write it down and collect data, they would discover very quickly that how they think things work and how things work are very different. But for me, this model of thinking of how orthodoxy says one thing and reality says another goes far beyond manufacturing. It's in the world out here. Because you will encounter orthodoxy all the time. You'll encounter it in religions, in cultures. You'll encounter it within organizations both big and small. And of course, the largest orthodoxy is the patriarchy and social conservatism. Those orthodoxies are all about telling other people how to live their lives in manners that often the people spewing the orthodoxy cannot achieve themselves, because the orthodoxy they are spewing has no bearing on how humans function or the reality around them. But they will hold people to that orthodoxy standard and punish them when they fail to live up to it, even though they themselves cannot live up to it. That's where the hypocrisy comes in. And one of the ways they control people is through shame. Shame is a powerful motivating social structure. It is a means of keeping people under control, because you convince them that if they are shamed, they are lesser. They have lost something. They have lost face for the family or themselves. There's many different ways of convincing people that shame is important. That's why when someone steps outside that orthodoxy, they are often referred to as shameless. They have cast shame aside. They are indifferent to whether you think they should feel shame or not, because they don't. If they've decided that they can't pretend that the orthodoxy they've been told is real when it isn't. Now, a lot of orthodoxy in the world today is about controlling women. It seems to be very popular. It goes across all kinds of cultures. It's existed for thousands and thousands of years, all the way back to the most earliest records we've got. It's all about controlling women. Also, slavery, sexual mores, and dress codes. All of these things are stuff that social conservatism and the orthodoxies they create really loves. But in the real world, fabric doesn't have a gender. Now, in America, if someone that has been assigned female at birth wants to dress in what is traditionally viewed as a masculine manner, that's kind of acceptable. In fact, there are people that find that titillating, even erotic. When a woman, someone that has been assigned female at birth and has lived in that role, they are cisgender, dons clothing which is masculine, that can attract attention, both bad and good. There were actual laws in the United States of America at one time saying that you had to have a specific number of items of clothing on your person, you had to be wearing them, that fit your gender. So if you had been assigned female at birth, you had to have like lacy undies and a bra and stockings on under your suit. If you didn't, you would be arrested. But a woman dressing in a masculine manner flies under the radar fairly easily. And if somebody dresses really butch, they'll often be accused of being a lesbian, but it's not as controversial as the other side of the coin when someone who has been assigned male at birth decides to dress in what is traditionally viewed as a feminine manner. Now, we're not talking about sexual orientation here. I've never brought that up so far. I'm just talking about presentation, gender. If a guy decides to put on a dress for whatever reason, that's going to cause a lot of hassles. That's going to make his life miserable because that orthodoxy I talked about is going to step all over him, literally and figuratively. He will lose social status. In some places, he may lose his freedom, his parenting rights. Lots of things could negatively impact his life just because he decides to dress in a manner that the orthodoxy says should be only allowed by those who have been assigned female at birth and traditionally present themselves in a feminine manner. Now, all this, of course, also holds for sexual orientation. Cisgender is supposed to be the norm. Now, I believe one of the statistics that's been kicked around for a long time is that 10% of humans are queer of some variety. I think it's a lot higher than that. I think it's probably more like 30. If we could get rid of all the prejudice, discrimination, and judgment, I think a whole lot more people would find that they are willing to express themselves sexually with more than maybe what they would be considered to be straight. A little bit more flexible than that. But society says they can't, so they don't, even though it lessens their life experience. And orthodoxies do the same thing up and down the line. And they all fly in the face of reality. Because what you want to wear shouldn't be decided by somebody else. Who you want to love shouldn't be decided by somebody else. Who you want to fuck shouldn't be decided by somebody else. Those things should all be decided by you and the person or persons you're involved with. And that's it. No one else should have a damn say in it. But they do. And that's the problem. So just like I have to deal with the reality at work when the engineers tell me it's supposed to go this way, and I can tell you it's going to go that way, and there isn't anything in the world that is ever going to convince the engineer that it isn't going to work this way. I have to deal with that every day. That's nothing compared to what people have to deal with in the world who are LGBTQ or who have decided to not wear the types of clothing that are supposed to be worn by someone of the gender that they were assigned at birth, or have chosen to practice a religion that falls outside the traditional for their society, or practice no religion at all. Those are much more difficult things to handle, to deal with. Breaking that kind of orthodoxy takes bravery, and I respect people who can do it. So let's talk about orthodoxy and reality. Tell me about the examples that you can think of where what people say should be done is not even close to what is actually done.